Hello everyone. Today I'm going to present about another episode of Herald Tribune World Youth Forum from 1954. This episode discussion about are the ideal of our parents outmoded? Presenter of the discussion is Mrs. Helen Height Waller. Participated following students: Nasreen NAZIR MAHMOOD from Pakistan, Nguyen DIEP from Vietnam, Nakchung PAIK from Korea, Mijiba KARIBO from Nigeria, Marlene ROODT Martin from South Africa.
This is National Educational Television, a program distributed by the Educational Television and Radio Center.
Are the ideas of our parents outmoded for this generation?
Yes, at least in Pakistan. We have had to adjust to more changes in these last 17 years than our ancestors did in the 700 years.
When I came here, I was very shy, unable to make a decision by myself, and afraid of everything. As a forum delegate, I either had to get over my shyness or die from the shock.
In Korea, especially since the war, we are having to review and modify the old values with which our parents were brought up.
My answer is no. Ideas may change, but ideals remain the same, more or less.
I think that the young people in South Africa today are much more tolerant than their parents are.
This is the world we want, with young people from the four corners of the globe brought together by the New York Herald Tribune Forum for High Schools, here to discuss the world we want under the direction of Helen Height Waller.
Next week's program is going to be the last in this series because in 2 weeks, on March 29th, all the students will be returning to their homes. So we don't have very many occasions left when the whole group can be together. Therefore, for next week's program, all 34 are going to be here. If you have any questions you'd like to ask any of the students, send them in. If your question is used on next week's program, then we'll invite you to come to the Herald Tribune Forum at the United Nations on March 26th as our guest. Everyone who sends in a question before next Thursday will get a free copy of the special Forum edition of the Herald Tribune. If you have a question to one of the 34 students, any of them, send it in to The World We Want, WOR-TV, 1440 Broadway, New York, 18. That's The World We Want, WOR-TV, 1440 Broadway, New York, 18, before next Thursday. And now to get back to our question for tonight's discussion, are parents obsolete, or at least are their ideals outmoded for this generation? How do we tackle it?
Well, maybe I should begin, because in Korea the proper way is gentleman first instead of a lady.
Gentlemen? I disagree, because in Pakistan it's always a lady.
Would you reserve your disagreement later? You mentioned tolerance, but I think that tolerance is one thing our parents lack, and it is one thing I've learned in my experience. Well, through my experience, I think the most important thing I gained is how, I came to learn that how unimportant these minor manners and minor formalisms are.
You mean your experience since you've been here in the United States, Nakchung?
Yes. Well, first of all, I had noted many differences and had to tolerate many things and understand them. And through all these, I get convinced that it is not important whether we greet people in this way or in that way. The important thing is to treat other people with kindness and with goodwill. That's important, and the mannerisms are not important.
Now, you know, excuse me, Nasreen, but I think it'd be awfully interesting, since I neglected to introduce you a moment ago, that we ask each of you now, what is the greatest degree of tolerance, and what occasion were you demanded since you've been here as a forum delegate? How about you, Nasreen, from Pakistan?
Well, what do you mean, Mrs. Waller?
Well, Nakchung was just saying that he learned on this trip that it's hard sometimes to tolerate an awful lot of new and different things. What did you find hardest since you've been here?
I think the food.
What's wrong with it?
Well, according to our taste, it's flat, I should say. I mean, it isn't seasoned as we do ours. And I find it very hard to get used to the food here.
How about you, Nguyen?
I think that the hardest thing is to talk to many people. I remember that when I first came here, I stayed in my room for 1 week because I was so scared to see so many people.
Is that where you were all the week? We were at Palmer House when we missed you.
Yeah, that's true. And every time we had a meeting, then I sat behind all the others and I didn't say anything. Because before I left, my grandmother told me that when I come here, I must not talk much. Just listen to the others and always say yes, yes, even if I don't agree with them, because we think that it is too impolite to disagree and say no.
Well, that's extraordinary advice to give a foreign delegate. I wonder if not only Indochina, did any of the others get advice of that kind? How about you, Minji, from Nigeria?
Well, nobody told me that, but I've had quite a few things to tolerate. The rush, I have to tolerate it, and the amount of talking too. And I'm becoming quite talkative myself, and I think some people have to tolerate me when I go back home.
Marlene?
Well, I agree with Minji. I had to tolerate the rushing because in South Africa we kind of take things easy. And also here that people don't give you much time to yourself. You're always surrounded by people and they talk and talk, and I fall into the same habit as Minji, I'm afraid.
Assimilation is easy, I gather. Yes, Nakchung.
I'm getting an impression that you are deliberately leaving me out.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
There.
Let's not discriminate against men. Go ahead, Nakchung.
Oh, there are quite a few, but say when a small boy in his early teens talk about girls or dating with their parents, it was rather unusual to me, because if I had done such a thing to my mother, she would think that I was a juvenile delinquent or something like that.
Aren't you?
No, don't. Marlene.
No, we know you're not. No.
Was that the hardest thing, Nakchung?
Not the hardest thing, but one of the hardest things. But there are quite a few. Well, say when parents are interrupted by their children and during their conversation, they just repeatedly entreat their mercy not to interrupt them, instead of telling them to shut up once and for all.
I know there are lots of American parents who would just love to know the secret you find in Korea of making the children not interrupt. But Nakchung, I'd love to get back to your point when you were saying you had to look again at your parents' ideals, that you had to modify and review them. Do you want to tell us more why you say that?
Well, as you know, the whole ethics and morality of Korea was based on Confucianism, the main teaching of which was respect for authority. But when the Western civilization came in, and with the Christianity and all other Western ways of living, we knew that we need to speak more freely and to treat everybody as an equal in order to establish a true democracy. Then inevitably there was a conflict between the old value and the new value. But this kind of conflict is not an unusual thing. It is.
I suppose the war accentuated it too, didn't it?
Yes, you can see it in general in many parts of the Asia. But in Korea, the destruction and the violence and all the change the war brought aggravated the situation, and the young people sort of lost their self-confidence, and they didn't have any means to fight for their survival, and so they just lost all their values and began to question the meaning of life itself and all the morality. And
you know, the same
so
thing
on.
happened in Pakistan, Mrs. Waller. When this trouble took between India and Pakistan, and the influx of refugees came over there, and the young people who sort of flew over to Pakistan, had to flee rather, and they started losing hope in the government, in life itself, and started questioning and saying, why are we living? What for? We formed our ideals, but they're all shattered now, and what do we live for now? And I think all the time, I mean, every war does this to a country.
Has this
Any
happened
place.
in Indochina, in Vietnam too, DIEP?
I think it happened in Vietnam too, but we still have Chinese traditions. We have French influence, but it only for the young generation like us. And our parents still have very old ideas. When my parents discuss things, I can't express my own opinion. And every time I try to argue them, they say, shut up, you impolite. And the only excuse they give is that they are my parents and they don't need my advices. I think that it's bad.
Well, what happens if they make a mistake?
They don't feel that they are wrong. If they know they are wrong, they don't admit it because they are afraid we don't respect them if we know they're wrong.
I wonder what the situation is in Africa. Or
Minji?
Well, if you mean our reaction to the impact of Western culture, well, when we first came in contact with the West, many people had the wrong idea in that they thought that everything African was no good and it was better to dress in European clothes and better to listen to jazz and the rest of it. But since after the war and when a very strong nationalist movement started in the country, we are going back to our old cultures and we now firmly believe that the African culture is the best thing for the Africans.
You wouldn't say then that your young people in Nigeria are as disoriented as Nakchung says the Korean youth today is?
Well, I don't know how far the Korean youth is disoriented.
Well, not very, if we're talking about Nakchung.
Well, but,
not me.
well, some African young people still have the belief I told you about that everything West must be best or better. But
in general, I gather there's a direction at least. Most of the young people in Africa know where you want to go and where you're determined to get.
Yes.
And do you feel that your young people have that direction or not at all, Nakchung?
Well, I think it is one of the characteristics of the Korean people that regardless of the difficulties, that we are determined to do something, not knowing what.
Well, yes, but that makes it a little difficult, doesn't it?
Oh, yes, it does.
Excuse me, Mr.
Yes.
Wall, I wanted to ask Mijiba actually. Minji, don't you think that adapting the old culture to the modern times is a better way? I mean, we can't just live in the past century. We have to adapt the old culture and the traditions, sort of improve them and live up to them in the modern times. Apply them modernly.
Yes, I think that's
you know what
very
I mean?
good. I understand you perfectly, but you don't understand, well, what your suggestion is good, but the people don't think anything African is of any use. That's what I said. They don't. They don't want to
hope in themselves.
Well, that's it. And we've been having new values now, and some people don't think of well, good manners or good character as anything, and everything is reckoned in pounds and shillings and cars and tall buildings.
You mean all materialistic things are more important than
Are getting more and more important.
Oh, I see.
Nasreen, take us back to Pakistan for a minute. How have these rapid changes taken place and why? You say you've changed more in 17 years than your ancestors did in 700.
Well, I think it was partly due to our right with India, Mrs. Waller, and I think the greatest development in Pakistan have been the women. You see, when this riot took place, the thousands of refugees that came in, the helpless, destitute, with their arms broken and absolutely nothing with them. And then the women decided, well, something has to be done. So they all left their veils, just dropped it completely, and they
Their
marched
veils.
out. That's right, you know what we cover ourselves with. And they marched out, and some of them even protested that now they're wanting equal status with men. But of course the men are putting up a strong opposition to that. But anyway, they help these poor people, and we have an organization which is called the All Pakistan Women's Organization. And there are thousands of ladies there, and they're doing wonderful social work, putting up hospitals and working as nurses and helping in social welfare in schools and teaching them better manners and how to live, and even giving them, well, a hope in themselves and in the future.
Is there a national women's organization like this in other countries in Asia? We hear more about the Pakistan.
We don't have it in our country.
Well, I know in Korea we have them, but I'm not too much interested in them.
Oh. You know, this man is not prejudiced, you know, he really is.
No, no.
Nakchung,
woman.
come back to Korea for a minute. You were talking about the effects of Confucianism and how long it took to get away from some of the forms of ancestor worship. What were some of those forms? We know so little about it here.
Oh, well, they are, of course, based on the good intention of revering the older people and the ancestors, but the forms are all so ridiculous. For instance, if a parent dies, the son or the sons just wear a strange-looking hat which covers all your face, because they say you are a sinner because you let your parent die.
Well, don't they have to die sometime?
Oh, I don't know, but that's a fact. And then he was so ashamed that he couldn't see the world, so he covered his face with the hat. And well, and somebody just argued and made enemies with the details of the ceremonies. Well, what kind of clothes one should wear, what kind of clothes daughter should wear, a daughter-in-law should wear. At parents' death, and how long, and well.
But does it still happen, Pei?
No, it is a story of past, and I'm very glad that it is.
We still have these customs in the country only, not in the town. And we think that when a parent dies, then the son has to cry very loudly. And if he can't cry, then he has to pay money for somebody who cries for him.
Well, there's one thing I don't understand here. We always talk about Asians of being, you know, not showing their emotions. Why then are you supposed to cry so loudly?
It means that they love their parents very much, and they have to express it so that
they cry loudly.
Yeah.
Well, doesn't this seem like a contradiction?
Yeah, perhaps that is an exception.
You know, because the public opinion is very strict, and they have to show that.
No, but Mrs. Wall, it's true. In our country too, the more loudly you cry, it shows you really love your parents. And if you cry for a week, it shows, well, you really love your parents much more. I mean, it depends on how long you mourn.
Point of no return, or little return. How long can you go on? I don't know why this subject is so funny, but still, it's interesting to us to get this. I'd like to ask you too, though, that along with this side of the old traditions that you say you are losing and you're glad you're losing, what about the deeper and more serious thing of regard for age and older people? Is it the same? Is it very different in America than it is in Asia?
Oh, yes, it is. Well, first of all, in Korea or in many other Asian countries, it is not an insult when I say to a lady that a very fine old lady, and she's very pleased when I say it. But I found in America they are rather afraid of getting old. Of course, well, I'm only 17 and I've never been older than 17. So I don't know how it is to grow old.
Wait till you grow old.
Like Nasreen, she's 18. Go on, forgive me.
Of course, I prefer the vigor and all the dreams of youth. But there is still something proud or something you can take pride in the wisdom and in the experience of the age. But the Americans just can't face it. They have just to conceal their age by all the artificial means. Of course, I don't particularly mind their continuing such a rather ridiculous fight against time, but I can assure them it will be a very tough and miserable fight, and unsuccessful until.
We have to grow old sometime.
When you talk about people using artificial means to prevent age from showing, do you mean things like makeup? All the girls in this group didn't use lipstick before they came here, and they're all doing it now. We could see if we had color television. Not you. I'm sorry, Miji. Forgive me. You're a good girl. You haven't got a bit on.
In my country, you know, even if we are more than 30 years old, we are still children if we are not married yet. And when we are children, then we have to obey our parents. In some old families, even if the children have, if the children are married and have children, they still have to obey their parents. And it's very strict. And not only the parents, but the older sister or older brothers, and sometimes uncles and aunts. If my relatives see me with a boy, for example, then they'll tell my parents, and my parents will punish me. Then therefore, sometimes I don't like the uncles or the aunts very much.
Marlene, what do you want to say?
Yes, I wanted to ask these three delegates from Asia, if I can call it like that, whether they don't feel sometimes that their families don't agree with these methods, but that they are afraid to give their children this freedom because of what the society is going to think of them. It's not really that they're personally against it, but that the society conveys this lesson.
That's right. They always feel that if you do anything, it's the people who will talk. That's
yes,
why
it's not a personal matter, it's what the people are going to think of you.
And another thing, Mrs. Waller, I'll show you how the ideas in our country haven't changed. In our country, still it persists that a girl and a boy get married without seeing each other, and the girl is not often asked whether she's... you like it? Oh, no, I think it's horrible, especially in the modern times. I mean, just getting two people married without seeing each other. And another way is that a boy must follow his father's profession. If he's good with his hands, skillful, but his father says, no, you must go and become a lawyer or something else like that. He can't because, well, his father, he has to respect his father and his authority. And so he has to follow his father's profession.
Excuse me, Nasreen. When does a boy come of age in Pakistan? Or does he never come of age?
Well, he does come of age. The legal age is 18.
And what happens then if he decides to disobey his father?
Well, I suppose he's disowned from the family. He has to stand up to life by himself.
Look, this is a very technical question, but sometimes when people get very, very old, sometimes they lose some of their faculties. Now, when do you decide that the old great-grandfather, who's always been the head of the family group, is so old that he isn't making rational decisions anymore? Is it possible while he's still alive?
Well, when he can't see anymore and when he has no teeth.
I don't think you can set any definite age. It just depends on the person. I mean, some person like Winston Churchill is in his office now. He's 80, but
he still has his personality.
Yes. And George Bernard Shaw, he was quite faint till he died.
Yes.
Nasreen, how do all of these holding to the old forms correspond to the new needs of a new country like Pakistan?
Well, I think it's primarily the younger generation. As I said to Mijiba, that we're trying to adapt the old culture to the modern times. We're trying to form new values and new ideals, irrespective of what our parents think. And I think it's the spirit of the younger generation which is sort of pushing the country ahead.
Well, do I imply then that you have to disobey your parents, you have to go against them if you're going to help your young countries do what they...
Yes, we'll have to do that, I'm afraid.
I think so. In my country, the first thing the parents teach their children is that the children have to obey their parents and respect them. I don't think it's necessary because all the children want to be good. And if they are not good, it may be because the parents don't know how to educate them correctly.
They're too hard on them, and sometimes when they let them out in the world, they often confuse their past life and they do the wrong things. And then, of course, they blame it on the parents.
How do you compare the relationship between children and their parents here with your relationship with your parents, for example?
Oh, it's very different, Mrs. Waller. I mean, here a father and mother are not just parents, they are companions, pals to their children. I mean, they have a perfect understanding between them, and they often talk about things which I wouldn't talk to my father and mother about. And in our house and in other Pakistani houses, the children there are very sort of tense when the parents are about, and very quiet and reserved. And they are parents, I mean, strict.
Wait a minute, let DIEP have a chance.
In my country, it's like that too. We don't have many opportunities to talk with our parents. And even when I have a problem, I cannot solve it by myself. I dare not tell my parents because I'm afraid of them. And I think that it's good here in this country to give the children to show the children that they are responsible for themselves. Because when they know that, they will know what they are supposed to do.
I don't think there is such as great a difference between the American way of living and Korean way of living as we presume. We have a tendency just to emphasize the difference, but if we see more clearly, we can find that, I mean, there is no difference, and all the minor manners and ways of expressing all the same emotions and all the same ideals is rather unimportant. And I think, well, as I told you in the beginning of the program, it is the most important thing I have gained in my forum program, because meeting so many people from so many different countries and still finding that they are same in essence, I just found that it is completely ridiculous to lose yourself to such a minor thing. There is a lot more thing to do rather than just following the minor steps and all the foremost things.
That brings us full circle. Now let me ask one question. Since I'm your parents' generation, I'm a little bit worried now that your departure is growing near over what your parents are going to think of you when you get back. What's the biggest shock your father's going to get when he sees you back?
I think what he'll dislike most is when I start comparing America and Pakistan. I say, well, they don't do that in America, so why should I do it in Pakistan?
How long do you think you'll get by with it?
I don't know.
Oh, you write me a letter, will you? How about you, Ziet?
I'm sure that my mother will be very surprised to see my face, because when I was at home, she didn't allow me to make up.
She'll be surprised at that new American hairdo, too, won't she? Very becoming, by the way. How about you, Nakchung?
I don't think my mother will find any new troubles, but I'm sure that she'll be dismayed that America didn't change any of my old troubles, such as my laziness.
Nakchung, do you find that the attributes of a fine, healthy boy, or fine, well-brought-up boy in this country are the same as they are in Korea?
Well, I'm not going to explain long. One of my host parents thought that the silence and modesty of mine is not necessarily a sign of a healthy boy.
In America.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder what your mother will think when she gets that letter. Minji, what is going to startle your parents when you get home?
What I would call my brazenness, and I'm getting quite talkative now. And some of the things I do appall me. I feel like a new person altogether.
His personality.
I'm going to write to your mother, too. How about you, Marlene?
Well, the first, I know definitely that my father is going to be terribly disappointed in my Bermuda shorts. I've sent him home some pictures, and he wrote to me, sent me some decent pictures. And also, I've learned to talk so much here and to eat so much. I've gained 10 pounds, and I don't think they're going to like me the way they're going to see me.
Well, you'll all write to me, I hope. Now, just to get the introductions properly identified, Nasreen Ahmad from Pakistan, Nguyen DIEP from Vietnam, Nakchung PAIK from Korea, Mijiba KARIBO from Nigeria, and Marlene ROODT from South Africa. Next week's going to be the last program on this series, and all 34 forum students will be here participating in the program. Till next week, this is Helen Hyatt Waller saying good night.